Hey CMA buddies, let's today start with 5.3. Today we'll be covering planning, organizing, staffing and leading. Our primary focus today will be on planning as it is a relatively bigger chapter. So we'll finish planning first and then we'll move on to the other parts of the chapter, right? Let's start with the topic right away. Let's understand what exactly is planning, right? Now the activity by which managers analyze present conditions to determine ways of reaching desired future state. So basically something which you need to attain in future. For that, whatever steps you take at this point in time is basically called as planning, right? That's what it's trying to explain. Planning helps organizations to choose goals based on estimates or future forecast. So the first and foremost thing that you should keep in mind while planning anything should be that you basically select the goals or choose your objectives based on the estimates or the future forecast as to you foresee what exactly you can do in order to attain today's objective. So that's the basic purpose of planning, right? So basically planning is what? It's basically analyzed by managers to determine the ways in the present conditions for reaching the desired future state, and also realize that in order for an organization to achieve certain goals, their planning should be completely based on estimates or the future forecast, right? Let's look at the definition. Let's look at the definition by one of the most renowned person, that is Harold Kuhns and Cyril O'Donnell, right? I'll make a video wherein I'll cover all the names because it's very obvious that there may be certain questions based on the names which come in the this part of your subject, right? So let's understand what did he say. Planning is basically an intellectual process, the conscious determination of course of action, basing of decision on purpose, facts, and considerate estimates. So net what he is trying to say is that basically it's a process which is more brain oriented, and your course of action is basically determined on the purpose, facts, and the estimates that you take into consideration, right? Okay. It is defined as what? It is defined as an activity that determines what should be done in advance. So basically, as we spoke already, that it should be based more on future forecast or the estimates. So planning is an activity that that would help you to determine what you need to do in advance, right? It consists of selecting organizational objectives, policies, programs, procedures, and other means of achieving the objectives, right? So what are the key components as far as planning is concerned? It basically consists of selecting organization objective. So you should know what is the organization objective, the various policies, programs, procedures, and the other means of achieving the objective. So what are the steps that needs to be taken in order to achieve your goal? So that's what is planning all about. Fine. Okay, let's move on to the features of the planning. Okay, there are many features. Let's start with the first one. Planning is basically a primary function of the management. So the first thing or the first step that you do is basically to determine or to lay down the principles of planning, right? So that's the primary function of management. Manager decides which alternatives, policies, procedures, programs, etc. are to be selected and eventually would be set up, right? So basically you need to determine what are the various alternatives, policies, procedures or programs that you need to select, and eventually you need to take steps to set up that. Then secondly, it should be goal oriented, right? Now it aims at defining the goals and design appropriate action plans to achieve them. So goal oriented means what? You should know what exactly is the goal of the organization. So basically your aim is to define the goals and design appropriate action plans to achieve them. The third one is intellectual process. It requires a mindset of what? Thinking before acting. So you need to think before you do anything so that your plan is very concrete and it's executed properly. Thinking before acting based on what? As per the facts and not guesses. So you should not assume things. You basically have to forecast or estimate things based on the facts and do things in an orderly way. Now who has said this? This has said by Theo Heyman, right? Please remember this name. So basically it's an intellectual process. So you require a mindset of thinking before acting. You should act as per the facts and there should be no guessing work and do things in an orderly way. Then it is pervasive. What do you mean by pervasive? It's basically spread everywhere with respect to organization goals and embraces all segments and levels. So pervasive means it is everywhere and anywhere as far as the organization goals is concerned, and it should take into account. Embraces means what? It should take into account all segments and the level. That means all categories of the employees that are working, that is top level, middle level and lower level, right? So that's what is pervasive. Then please remember it's a continuous function. To ensure organization is going concern, planning must be done continuously. because you know that organization follows a principle of going concern. In that case, the planning should be done on a continuous basis. Now it involves choices between alternatives, right? Now you can have it involves a lot of alternatives amongst various courses of action. So every plan basically have different alternatives to be worked upon. So you got to ensure that you select the proper alternative in order to execute the plan in a right manner. If there is only one choice, that is, there's only one course, one objective, one policy, one program, one procedure, etc., then there's no need of planning. So the planning will be required only when you have different alternatives. If there is only one alternative, what's the point of planning? Whatever is there, you're going to execute it. It's as simple as that. Then concerned with the accomplishment of group objectives. That's the core purpose of a planning, aimed at setting group goals and organizational goals rather than concentrating on individual goals. So your target should be setting up of group goals, and it should not be individual focused, right? Okay, and it should be flexible. Now plans basically are not rigid. That means they are not fixed, or they are not something which you need to do. Come what may, you should stick to that plan. No, it should be flexible enough so that you can adapt as per the situations or the environment. Now, although it is based on definite course of action, but future assumptions upon which plans are based may force managers to change the original plans, right? Now, for example, you have estimated something and you have laid down a plan. Now, suddenly that estimate changes, right? Because of some kind of external situation or the internal environment. In that case, you got to be flexible enough and change the plans accordingly, right? So that's what it intends to tell you. Okay, so quickly look at what all features are there of planning. First is, it is the primary function of the management, should be goal oriented. It's an intellectual process. It is pervasive. Pervasive means what? It should be spread everywhere and it should cover all segments and the levels. It is a continuous function. It involves choices between alternatives. It is concerned with the accomplishment of group objectives, and finally it should be flexible, right? Okay, let's come to the limitations of planning. Limitations means what? They are cons or the drawbacks. What are the various drawbacks of planning? First of all, it can be inaccurate, right? Inaccuracy is the first limitation of planning. Okay. The formulation of plans based on wrong forecasts may not give desired results, right? So the limitation of planning is inaccuracy. If you don't forecast properly, of your assumption is basically wrong, then the plan can actually go wrong. So that's one of the limitation of planning. Secondly, it's a very time consuming process. It involves a lot of energy, time and mobilization of different resources. Yes, because there are a lot of people who are involved in it, so there's an energy consumption. Obviously, you have to spare some time dedicatedly for planning, and your resources should be allocated or allotted properly, because if there is no proper mobilization of resources, then your plan can go kaput, right? Then there is a rigidity. Now, planning leads to some amount of rigidity in policies, procedures, programs and methods, right? You got to stick to certain plans which are rigid. You got to be flexible, that's fine, but at the core of it, you have to make sure that certain plans are basically rigid, because you got to follow certain policies, procedures, programs and methods. So you got to work under that framework. So in that case, it becomes a rigid thing. Now there has to be a balance between stability and flexibility in planning, right? You got to make sure that the stability, there's a balance between the stability and flexibility. You cannot be too much flexible, not too much rigid. So that's something which you got to take care of. That again becomes a limitation of the planning. Then it is a very costly affair, because it requires dedicated time, money and information, right? So it is time consuming also, whereas it is a costly affair also. Then then there can be a change in the attitude of the management. Why? Because it requires a tremendous amount of paperwork and time. Now, managers prefer not to undergo such a painful process and prefer to become doers than thinkers. So rather than thinking something, people believe more in executing things, right? So planning is a process which is more estimating the future and making forecast. So that can be a very cumbersome process which can have an effect on the attitude of the management. Hence, you got to make sure that management is being motivated to do that. Now again, from a limitation perspective, it's basically because you got to think more and do less, so it can be a limitation of the planning process. Then faulty design of planning system. Limitation due to for design of the planning system. If the planning system is not shaped properly, in that case, that can be a setback for the organization goals and the objectives. Hence, a faulty design of planning system can be a setback. Now, how this faulty design of planning system can be a setback? It covers it contains certain subparts, right? How? First of all, there can be a lack of reward. Now planning system doesn't have reward mechanism. Yes or no? You plan, you tell, and the things are being executed. So basically in planning something you don't get a reward. Hence managers focus on short-term results of their performance that carries reward. Yes or no? Because eventually everyone wants to grow, and unless and until you show numbers, you won't be able to get a proper reward from the organization. So you got to make sure that there's some kind of reward involved. Otherwise, planning mechanism generally doesn't contain any reward, and that can be detrimental to the manager's growth. Now there can be a lack of participation. Why? When imposed by authorities, it may lead to reluctance among those who are forced to execute. Reluctance means they're not ready to take that or not ready to accept something. That is called as reluctance. So when imposed by the authorities, that means if the authorities give you the directions to implement it, people may not accept it because they are forced to execute that. So they may not be happy doing it, although they will be doing it, but they are not happy doing it eventually, which could lead to non-performance or not up to the mark performance, right? Then there's a lack of specific activities. Planning can't be effective unless the goals are specific and clear. So your goal should be very specific and clear. If you don't know which way you're heading to, your plans may not come properly or may not work out properly. Competence of the planner. A planner shall have skill, intelligence and breadth of vision, and shall have the ability to forecast. So if he doesn't have any of the qualities, so in that case the plan may not work as per the way you desire, right? So it's very important that the planner should have a good skill, intelligence and breadth of vision, and he should be able to focus. So if he misses any of these skills, in that case the plans may be in trouble, right? Okay, then you come to other limitation of planning. Now planning prevents innovation. Why? Because it demands total commitment to written policies, procedures and rules. Because you got to adhere to certain policies, procedures and rules. So in that case, if you want to think something out of the box, you won't be able to do that. Hence the planning prevents innovation. It restricts managers to restricted areas. So your scope is very limited. You got to work within that framework. In that case, you cannot think out of the box. Hence planning basically prevents innovation. Right? Then there is a lack of orientation and training for managers. What do you mean by that? Most managers tend to put off planning as it is not at all exciting or action oriented, right? So it basically lacks orientation and training for the managers because it's not exciting, because you got to do whatever is being told to you. You don't think something extra. So that's why it basically lacks orientation and training, and there is a lot of uncertainty because you basically do it on an estimated basis. Hence there is a lot of uncertainty whether your plans will be successful or not. So it has to consider numerous uncertainties in the environment, right? Quickly look at the various limitations. Okay, limitations. First one is it can be inaccurate. It is a time consuming process. There is a bit of rigidity because you follow certain policies, procedures, etc. It can be a costly affair. Attitudes of the management, because there is a tremendous amount of paperwork and time that's involved. So basically we want to do things more than think. So that's the drawback of planning. There may be a faulty design of planning system. Why? Because of the following reasons. There may be a lack of reward, there may be a lack of participation, there may be a lack of specific activities, and if the competence of the planner is not up to the mark. Then planning prevents innovation, right? Because you can't think beyond your policies, procedures, rules. Hence, it may limit your innovation skills. Now, lack of orientation and training for managers. And finally, there may be a lot of uncertainties. Finally, it says that sudden and dramatic changes in technology, competition, government regulation, political, legal, ethical and social changes reduces the effectiveness of planning effort. Right? So if there is any change in the technology, competition, government regulation, political, legal, ethical, social changes, so any changes in the external environment can basically reduce the effectiveness of the planning effort, right? Okay, now what are the prerequisites of effective planning? What all things have to be taken into consideration before planning anything? That is prerequisite, right? Now there are certain general principles to make plan effective. Now, what are these general principles to make an effective plan? First of all, plan should be simple and easy to understand. It should not be complicated, because complicated plans can lead to misunderstanding among the members, right? If the picture is not clear, then the plans may become very complex in nature for other people to understand. So basically one of the principles is to make plan effective is it should be simple and easy to understand. It should be selective. Now successful managers never try to cover too much territory, right? So you have to make sure that the plans are very selective. They are not very far-fetched. right? Okay, then plan should take into account the needs of those who are going to implement the same. So people who are going to implement that, even their needs should be taken into account. It should not be only goal oriented in a way, looking at the fact that the people who are executing it are not being benefited. So whosoever is going to execute the plans, their concern should also be taken into consideration. And finally, plan should be thorough. Why? Because it should not omit any function or sub-function and should not overlook necessary details. So it should be thorough in nature. It should be very well detailed and explained, because if it is not thorough, then the plan will not turn out to be an effective one. The controversial statement should be avoided or ignored. There should be no controversy involved as far as the plans are concerned. So no controversial statement. Controversial means what? Which can lead to some kind of difference of opinion or debates, right? There should not be no fights because of the plans. So such kind of statement should be avoided or ignored. Okay. Now please remember this name as per Gary Dessler, right? What Gary Dessler said is proper planning. For proper planning, the managers should consider the following points. What are the points that the managers need to consider for planning properly? That is said by Gary Dessler, right? Okay, first of all, you should be able to develop accurate forecast. That's the first and foremost thing as far as the plan is concerned, because forecasting users should be educated in the art of forecasting techniques with respect to what practical problems, and should be encouraged to look into the informational needs of the managers. So if you are a forecasting user, you should make sure that the person who are doing forecasting, they are very well trained and educated with the practical problems. So you can take the reference of the other organizations or any problems that you have faced in real world or in practical, whatever the situation is. So forecasting people should understand that and should make the forecasting based on that, and hence they should be encouraged to look into the information needs of the manager. So whatever the needs of the managers are, that should be catered to. Now secondly, he says that it should gain acceptance for the plan. Now whatever plans you are executing, the people should have a tendency to accept that. Now necessary to secure acceptance and commitment from the people, because if there is no acceptance in the plans as such, then the execution may be a failure, ultimately affecting the goals of the organization. This can be done by how? This can be done by encouraging subordinates participation in the planning process. So you got to make sure that whenever you're doing a planning, you do involve the lower level management also, or the middle level management. It should not be just top level doing it and just passing on the burden to the lower or the middle, ultimately affecting the planning process as such, right? The plan should be a sound one. Sound one means it should have a lot of substance in it. It should not be made just for the sake of making it. Now to enhance the efficiency, managers shall adopt an open system approach where they identify and concentrate on complex environment in which their organization is functioning, apart from just looking at the pros and cons, right? So basically, if you got to enhance the efficiency, managers should adopt a system where they can identify and concentrate on complex environment, something which is very tough in nature, in which there is an organization functioning apart from just looking at the pros and cons. So your concentration should not be just looking at the profits and the losses. Your idea should also be to address if there is any cumbersome process that you may come across, right? So hence you should make sure that the plan must be a sound one. Then you should develop an effective planning organization. How? Solution to questions requires a blueprint for planning and a planning organization as such. So there should be a blueprint. That means you should lay down a foundation to ensure that the planning and the planning organization, everything is being taken into consideration. So you should have an effective planning organization. It should be objective. Managers should verify the truth behind pessimistic notions of belief. Pessimistic means something which is negative in nature. So if there is a reluctance or there is some kind of negativity, then managers should also consider that. For successful planning, managers must be objective. They should have a very objective approach towards and not subjective approach towards the planning, right? You should be able to measure firm's market value. You should know the firm that you're working in, what is the market value of that, and the plan should be based on that. So managers should measure firm's market value and should ensure the market share of the organization is as large as possible. Managers should estimate the firm's market share. So whenever you're making a plan, you should know with respect to your competitors what exactly is market share, and you should ensure with the help of the plans you are able to expand your market share, right? Okay, and it says decide in advance the criteria for abandoning a project. What do you mean by abandoning? Abandoning means to leave or to just not execute the project rather, right? So you should decide in advance the criteria for abandoning a project. So if you are just leaving a project, you should know what are the criteria for that. Now plan should include specification agreed in advance for abandoning the plan. So you should have a clear picture as to why you want to abandon the plan. Manager should not hesitate to discard unproductive connections in the market. So if something which is unproductive, in that case, if you are making new plans, in that you should make sure that those unproductive connections are being discarded or being thrown away. Fine. You should not stick to it if it's something which is not profitable or which doesn't help you to attain the goals of the organization. In that case, you should make sure that they are being discarded. Okay. Then there is a need to set up a monitoring system. Now plan should have a system of regular appraisal and review. So whatever plans you are making, you should be able to review that properly. So there should be a regular appraisal and a review towards that. Every plan should be refined and restructured on the basis of accurate and timely information. So every plan have a system of, should have a regular appraisal and a review system. Plan should be refined. Refined means whatever is required, that is being kept. Something which is not required should be filtered out, and restructured on the basis of what? They should be restructured on the basis of accurate and timely information, right? Then you revise the long-term plans every year. You should make sure that if there is a long-term plan, if there is any amendment to be made to it, or if you go to revise it, then that should be done on a regular basis, at least on a yearly basis. Management to review long-term plans each year to match up with what? With external opportunities with organization resources in a proper way. By reviewing the process, under or over performance of the plans can be detected. So what's the purpose of reviewing every year? If there is any underperformance or the overperformance, that basically can be detected, right? So that's the main purpose of planning. Now fit the plan to the situation. So you should fit the plan as per the situation only. Should not be something in excess, not something which is less. Change in environment shall be identified and appropriate strategy should be devised to cope with the change. So you should make the plans as per the changes in the environment or the situation. Fine. Okay. Quickly look at what has Gary Dessler said about proper planning. The manager should consider the following points before the proper planning. What are they? Develop accurate forecast, gain acceptance of the plan. Plan must be a sound one. Develop an effective planning organization. It should be objective. Measure firm's market value, decide in advance the criteria for abandoning a project. Then there is a need to set up a monitoring system, revise the long-term plans every year and fit the plan as per the situations, right? Now what are the various steps in planning process? Okay, the first one is analysis of opportunities, right? You should, first step is basically analysis of opportunities where in the external environment. So you should know what are the opportunities that are existing in the market to decide the planning process, or that's rather the first step in the planning process. Now goals can be set based on what? Scanning the environment. Scanning means knowing the environment, which reveals the opportunities that exist. So you should know what opportunities are existing there in the market, right? Second point is you got to establish the objectives. Okay, now how do you establish objectives? Organizational objectives provide directions to the major plans. So if you know what exactly is your objective, then only you can plan accordingly. Fine. Okay, determining planning premises. What do you mean by planning premises? Environment in which plans are to be implemented are called as planning premises. Task of premises should be to carry on only those aspects that are critical to the plan, right? So you should make sure that you determine the planning premises based on what? Planning premises is nothing, basically environment that you're working in or you're competing in, that becomes your premises. So environment in which plans are to be implemented are called as planning premises. What is the task of premise? Task of the premise should be to carry on only those aspects that are critical to the plan, right? Okay, then you have to identify the alternatives. Fine. Okay, different feasible alternatives needs to be identified to achieve a particular objective. Okay, so you got to identify the most feasible alternatives that you have. Then evaluation of alternatives. Alternative needs to be evaluated on the basis of goals to be achieved. So alternatives have to be evaluated on the basis of what? On the objectives or the goals that the organization intends to achieve. Fine. Alternatives needs to be selected on the basis of various constraints and uncertainties that exist. So it needs to be selected on the basis of what? Various constraints or various drawbacks that are there and any uncertainty that exists. Now selection of the best alternative, selecting the most appropriate course of action. So First you identify, then you evaluate, and finally you select the best alternative. Two or more plans are kept as backup considering the unpredictability of the future. So you always say that I have plan A, but if your plan A fails, then you can go to plan B or plan C, right? So that is what is the selection of best alternative is. Then implementing the plan. You have identified the alternatives, you have evaluated it, you have checked the best alternative along with the backup that you have, then you implement the plan. Now putting plans into action. What is implementing the plan? Whatever plans you have decided upon, you are putting that into action. Now managers should consider series of important decisions during implementation of the action stated in the plan, right? Finally, reviewing the plan. Fine, whatever plans are being implemented, you got to review, right? Previously also Gary Dessler said that whatever plans you are making, you got to appraise and review. Same is the case in process of planning also. You got to review the plan. Help managers to evaluate the effectiveness of plan, whether plans are implemented properly or not, right? So what are the various steps in planning processes? First of all, there should be analysis of opportunities. Then you establish the objective, determine planning premises. What is planning premises? Environment in which the plans are going to be implemented are called as planning premises, right? Then you identify the alternative, you evaluate the alternative, you select the best of them, implement the plan, and finally you review the plan, right? Okay. Then we come to the approaches to planning. Now basically approaches to planning are basically of four types, right? What are these four types? Top down, bottom up, composite, and team approach, right? Okay, let's start with the first one, top down approach. What does top down approach tells you? Top management takes initiative in formulating major objectives. So when I talk about the top down approach, that means top down means it comes from the higher management to the lower management. So that is top down approach. Top down, right? Top management takes initiative in what? Formulating major objectives, strategies, policies, and plans in comprehensive manner. So in top down approach, the top management plays a pivotal role. Whatever plans or the initiatives that they make, that is being passed on to the lower ones, right? These steps are then conveyed to the middle and supervisory level for translating them into the performance result. So once they devise the plan, they got to pass it on to the middle and the supervisory level for its implementation. Managers have little role in planning. Their main focus is on implementation and day-to-day control. That's obvious, right? Managers basically belong to the middle level. So whatever plans are being made by the top management, that is being passed on to the middle management, whose main purpose is not planning, but basically the implementation of that. So that's what is top-down approach. Second one is bottom-up approach. Bottom-up, that means opposite of the first one. So it moves from the lower to the higher. Here the plan proposals originate from the supervisory level management, travel to the top management for review and approval. Previously what we did it in top down. It went from higher to lower, or rather I should say higher to middle. It's not exactly higher to lower, but higher to middle. Here what happens, it goes from middle to higher, right? So basically the plans are proposed or they are originated from the supervisory level management, and it goes to the top management forward for review and approval. Top management refrains from giving any guidance to lower management on what to plan and how. So basically the leverage is given to the middle management for the planning purpose. Top management has the role of only reviewing approval. They don't interfere in the planning process of the middle management as such. Fine. Okay, then you come to something called as composite approach. Composite means what? Together, right? So top management provides parameters and guidelines to line executives at middle and lower level management level, allows the needed flexibility and support to formulate tentative plans. So basically an authority is given by the management along with certain parameters and guidelines. So they lay down certain guidelines and parameters. It's passed on to the line executives, where at the middle, at the lower level management, they are given the flexibility and also the support for planning tentative plans. Tentative means stopgap. That means they will plan something, but eventually it should go to the top management and they'll review that, right? It is then reviewed and finalized by the top management. That's what I was telling you. So basically tentative means which is not permanent, which is temporary being made. So tentative is nothing but a temporary plan. So it is being reviewed and finalized by the top management, with whom in consultation with all the managers at the appropriate level. So basically it would be guidelines will be given by the top management, to the line executives and middle and lower management. They'll be given the flexibility also to formulate the tentative plans. Then what will happen? It will be then reviewed and finalized by the top management, with whom in consultation with the managers at the appropriate levels. Now, how does it help you? It is useful in execution of corporate wide plans also, which at some level draw inspiration from planning ideas and perspective generated at lower levels. So what will happen is everyone will feel inclusive because the plans are made by middle and the lower management, and the appraisal is done on a comprehensive level along with taking into consideration all the departments. It's very likely that there will be a lot of acceptance as far as the composite approach is concerned, right? Okay, then finally we come to what is called as a team approach. Okay, what does team approach tells you? It says task of planning is delegated to select team of managers with the line managers or staff experts. So it's very unlike composite wherein everyone is taken into account. Here in team approach, plans are given to a specific team of managers. It can be either line managers or the staff experts, and they are the ones who will be given the task of planning. Fine. Okay, it does not finalize the plan but initiates planning process, identify the problem areas and opportunities, examine the internal and external environment, collects information, seek ideas and formulate tentative proposals for consideration by the chief executive. So what is done is that it is not the final plan. Fine. What will happen is it basically initiate the planning process. It identifies the various problem areas, environments, then it collects the information, but it will give you a tentative, that is a temporary proposal. Who will consider it? It is being ultimately considered by the chief executive. Now this team at later stage shall be asked to monitor the progress of plans and review performance. Because the responsibility is bestowed to them, hence they are the one who would be able to monitor, or they should rather monitor the progress of plans and the review performance, right? So these are the four approaches to planning. First one is top down. That means it is being initiatives are being taken by the objectives are being laid down by the top management, and it is passed on to the supervisory management for the implementation. Bottom up, what happens is it is the opposite of the first one. Plans are being decided by the middle or the supervisory management, and they are conveyed to the top management. Here the top management doesn't interfere into the planning and how it is being done. Now composite approaches, basically top management gives you certain parameters and guidelines passed on to the lower and the middle management. They will decide, but it will be a tentative plan. That means a temporary plan. It is then reviewed and finalized by the top management in consultation with all the managers. But team approach is what? Team approach is basically there is a team that is made for the planning. It can consist of the line managers or the staff executive, but again it should be what? It should be tentative proposal only. That would be based on various situations like the planning process, problem areas and opportunities, internal and external environment, but it should be given to the chief executive for the final consideration. So he would be the one who will take the last and final call, but at the later stages the team which has been set up for planning process would be the one who would be monitoring the progress of plans, and they will be reviewing the performance, right? Okay, now let's look at the various types of plans. Now, what are the different types of plans? Plans are required to guide managers to make decisions, take action and solve problems. These plans help managers to manage day-to-day affairs, utilize organization's resource effectively, and regulating the work behavior of the subordinates. Fine. So basically plans are required for what? To guide managers, right? So it should give you a platform for guiding the managers to make decisions, to take action and solve problems. These plans help managers to manage day-to-day affairs. So these managers with the help of plan should be able to manage the day-to-day affairs. That's the routine working. Utilize organization resource effectively and regulating the working behavior of the subordinates. So what are the different types of plans? Plans basically are of two types. One is called as a standing plan. Now what is a standing plan? Something which is recurring in nature. Recurring means something which can be done again and again and again, right? So they are used repeatedly in situations of similar nature, right? So if there is a type which is being followed day in and day out, so that becomes a recurring. So in that case, you have got to execute the standing plans. Used again and again over a longer period of time, they answer recurring problems and are of permanent nature. So please remember, standing plans basically are of permanent nature and they basically are recurring. So these are the two keywords that you got to remember. They simplify decision making process since they decide in advance what and how a variety of operations are to be dealt with. Objective, policies, procedures and rules are important standing plans. So what are the different types of standing plans that you have? The policies, the procedures, the rules that are there, that are a perfect example of standing plan because they are recurring and permanent in nature, right? Then there is something called as a single use plan. What do you mean by single use plan? It should be used once and discarded. That's very obvious. Single use, you use once for a specific objective and then you just discard. That means that plan is no more required. Now it is designed to cater to need of a specific situation and is used up when the goal is achieved. So once the goal is achieved, you don't need it, you just discard it. It is for short period of time. Budgets, schedules, projects, etc. are example of single use plans. So standing plans, when you talk about the objective, policies, procedures and rules, because that is something which you got to use uniformly and on a regular basis. Hence that is a standing plan. But single use plans, the example can be schedules, projects, budgets, etc. because they can be used only once and then it is discarded. So please remember that single use plan basically are non-recurring. And the first one was permanent, hence this is temporary in nature. So these are the two features of single use plan, right? Okay, now we come to something called as planning premises. The environment, if you remember, one of the points we read it in, so that is what is planning premises. So basic assumption of the environment in which plans are expected to be implemented. So what exactly is the planning premises? Basic assumptions that of the environment that you take into consideration where the plans are expected to be implemented. Now premises effectively guides planning process. So it gives you a platform, or it gives you a basically it guides you. Premises basically helps you in planning process. Now planning premises are largely derived from forecasting. So the basic rule with which a planning premise works is on the basis of forecasting, right? Effectiveness of planning is based on the fact that how accurately the premises are developed from the forecasting data. So the planning effectiveness is based on how accurately the premises are developed. For what? For forecasting the data. Although it is not possible to accurately predict the future environmental conditions, planning is based on certain assumptions about the environment. Now these assumptions are captured in the premises categorization. Right? So basically it is not possible to accurately predict the future. Let's look at its categorization. The first one is based on certain assumptions about the environment. What do you mean by these assumptions are captured in the factors existing within the business organization based on the any factor that is a planning existing within the business organization is the basis of internal premises, right? Now what all these includes? This includes basically sales forecast, cash flows, capital budgeting, advertising expenses, product line, competence of managerial personnel, right? So these exactly are the internal premises. Now what exactly do you mean by external premises? Now external premises are basically concerned with what? With general business climate, which comprise of what? It comprises of economic, social, political, technological conditions in the economy, right? So internal premises and external premises is one kind of categorization of the planning premise. Internal means the factors which exist within the business and organization is called as internal premise. Include sales forecast, cash flows, capital budgeting, advertising expenses, product line, competence of managerial personnel, etc. Whereas when we talk about external premises, it's more concerned with the general business climate, which comprise of what? Economic, social, political, technological conditions in the economy, right? Then the next part of the categorization, we talk about controllable, semi-controllable and uncontrollable premises, right? So premise controllable by management is called as controllable premises. So a premise which can be controlled by the management is called as controllable premise. These includes what? It includes internal policies, credit policies, investment plans, research projects, rules, etc. Right? So when we talk about controllable, it is controllable means what? Which an organization has a control over. So basically we talk about the management from the management perspective. So if a management has a control over the premise, that is called as controllable premises. So all the internal policies, credit policies, investment plans, research projects, rules which are being executed by the management, they have a control over it, hence it is called as a controllable premise. Now these are basically within the jurisdiction of the management, right? Now if we talk about semi-controllable premise, then it means management has some control. That means they don't have the complete control, they have some control. So what are the things over which management has some control? It can be union management relations, right? So with union can take certain calls, but if you go hand in hand with the union, then even you can exercise some control over them. So union management relationship. Similarly, firm share in the market. So it's basically how you perform that can actually lead to your increasing of control, but again that is not exactly fully controlled by you. Similarly, market strategies, labor turnover. Labor turnover means the number of people who are leaving the company and joining the company. So if someone wants to resign, maybe you can convince them to stay back, but then if he doesn't intend to, then what do you do? So it is basically semi-controlled by you. Finally, you talk about uncontrollable premises. That is, you have no control. So what are these things which you don't have a control over? It can be natural calamities, wars, strikes, innovations, etc. Right? So you talk. So this is another categorization of the planning premises. Finally, we talk about tangible and intangible premises. Tangible means what? Which is physical or which can be touched which can be felt or which can be touched and can be seen by nature. But intangible is something which cannot be felt or touched. For example, goodwill, etc. is more of an intangible premise, right? Now, premises that can be expressed in tangible physical terms, so which you can see and which is basically existing in nature, which can be felt, is called as a tangible premise. These can be what? Labor hours, production units, etc. Right? Similarly, when you talk about intangible premise that cannot be quantified, right? So what all exactly can be an example of intangible premise? Public relations, employee morale, reputation of the firm, competitive strength of the firm. So these basically are the intangible premises, right? So basically in the last part of the chapter we have seen what? We have seen the categorization of planning premises. We talk about the internal and external. Internal is something wherein the factors exist within the business organization, and external is something which is concerned with the general business climate. Whereas when you talk about controllable, semi-controllable and uncontrollable, controllable is something which management has a complete control over. So these can be internal policies, credit policies, investment plans, etc. And it is within the jurisdiction of the management. And we talk about semi-controllable premises wherein management has some control. So these can be union management relationship, firm share in the market strategies, etc. Uncontrollable means something which you don't have a control over completely, right? These can be natural calamities, wars, strikes, innovations, etc. And finally, we talk about tangible and intangible premises. Tangible is basically which can be expressed in physical terms. Example is labor hours, production units, etc. Whereas intangible premises something that cannot be quantified. So example can be public relations, employee morale, reputation of the firm, competitive strength, etc. Right? So with this we finish planning. Now in the next video we'll be looking at the organizing and the subsequent portions that we have. If you like this content, please press the like button, because that will give me a lot of motivation to make such more videos, and do subscribe to our channel for further videos and updates, right? Thank you for joining and keep learning.